March 1945. Trier, Germany. Inside a commandeered customs house behind the Third Army line, a rubber stamp came down on the same word again. Hold, not rejected, not approved, just held. On the left side of the desk sat 41 promotion packets for black soldiers who had been building roads, clearing mines, and dragging wounded men out of shell holes since the winter. On the right side sat a fresh stack from white replacement companies. Those were moving, those were signed, routed, and posted in days. But the 41 packets from the Segregated Engineer Battalion had not moved in 172 days. 6 months of combat. 6 months of men doing sergeant's work with private's pay. 6 months of a stamp pretending to be policy. The officer behind the desk thought nobody important would notice. He thought a war this large had no time to care about a few missing stripes. He thought the front line was where courage happened, and the rear office was where men like him could quietly decide who deserved to be seen. He was wrong, because the trail did not end at his desk. It ended with George Patton, and Patton was about to learn that one of his own officers had turned a personnel file into a weapon. Lieutenant Colonel Abram Shaw had learned to recognize two kinds of silence. There was the silence before German artillery, and there was the silence of a soldier who had stopped expecting fairness. The second one frightened him more. Shaw commanded a segregated engineer battalion attached to 3rd Army road and bridge work. His men were black Americans from Alabama, Missouri, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, and the Carolinas. They were not the men who appeared in newsreel glory shots. They were the men who made movement possible after the cameras left. They filled craters at night. They hauled beams through snowmelt. They cleared roadblocks under mortar fire because the tanks could not wait for daylight. A corporal named Ellis Ward had pulled 2 white infantrymen out of a wrecked half track near Saarburg and gone back for the radio while machine gunfire chipped brick off the wall beside him. A private named Henry Tolliver had been leading a bridge crew for 5 weeks because the original sergeant was dead, and everyone else already looked to him when the shells started walking closer. A squad leader named Louis Freeman had memorized every man in his platoon by voice, gait, and cough, because blackout work meant you could not always see the person beside you. That was the part that made Shaw furious. The Army was taking their leadership every day. It simply refused to put the stripes on their sleeves. Every week, Shaw sent the same packets forward. Every week they disappeared into the personnel pipeline, and every week the answer came back in neat clerk language: pending verification, administrative hold, supporting review required. One phrase after another, all of them clean, all of them cowardly. By late March, Shaw stopped. He took the files himself. The personnel office in Trier was warm enough to make him hate it. Outside, men were sleeping in wet socks. Inside, the floor had been waxed. The windows were taped against blast damage. A pot of coffee sat near a map table. Clerks moved forms from tray to tray with the calm rhythm of men who had learned to call delay a system. Major Leland Crow sat at the largest desk in the room. He was 44 years old, from a county in eastern Kentucky, where he had learned early that rank could be used as a fence. His uniform was immaculate. His hands were soft. His boots were polished so sharply they reflected the ceiling beams. Crow did not look like a man holding back a battalion. That was the danger of him. He looked like paperwork. Shaw placed the folder stack on the desk. Major, these promotions have been pending since October. Crow glanced at the top page. Then he looked past Shaw, not at him. We are still reviewing eligibility. Eligibility for men who have been leading squads in combat? For permanent, non-commissioned rank, Crow said. Combat necessity is not the same as qualification. Shaw kept his voice low. The white engineer companies attached beside us have received 64 promotions in the same period. Their records were in better order. The forms are identical. Crow removed his glasses and wiped one lens with a handkerchief. Colonel, identical forms do not mean identical men. The room changed. Not loudly, no chair scraped, no clerk spoke, but several typewriters stopped at once. Shaw looked at Crow's hand. The rubber stamp sat inches from his wrist. Say that plainly, Shaw said. Crow smiled without warmth. I am saying the army must be careful about what kind of man it asks others to follow. My men are already being followed. By their own kind, perhaps, Shaw leaned forward. They have led white infantry across mined roads. They have guided tank columns through villages under fire. They have recovered bodies your office still lists as missing. Crow's face hardened. And that service is appreciated. No, Shaw said. You appreciate a mule for pulling. You promote a soldier for leading. Crow put his glasses back on. The army has traditions, Colonel. This war has created temporary pressures. Some people are trying to turn those pressures into permanent changes. These packets are not politics. Everything becomes politics when standards collapse. Standards, temperament, bearing, natural authority. Shaw stared at him. There is no block on this form for natural authority. Crow tapped the stack with 2 fingers. There is a block for my signature. It was the quietest threat in the room, and every clerk understood it. Crow lifted the stamp and pressed it into the red ink pad. Until I am satisfied, these remain held. The word bled across the top page, hold. Shaw did not touch the file. He did not argue another minute. He simply gathered the packet, turned toward the door, and said one sentence. You have mistaken your desk for a command. Crow laughed. General Patton has bridges to cross. He will not stop a war for sleeve stripes. Shaw looked back. Then you better hope I never reach him. The war outside was moving faster than the Army's conscience. Third Army columns were lunging east. Fuel trucks ran nose to tail. Medics worked in schools, barns, and church basements. Military police pushed traffic through towns where German signs still hung over shattered windows. Maps were changing by the hour in that storm. Rear offices became hiding places. A man with a stamp could bury a name. A man with a routing code could make merit vanish without ever calling it denial. That was how Crow had done it. He had not written a racist order. He had not made a speech. He had created a private category inside the machinery, special verification, additional review, morale sensitivity, terms that sounded responsible until you saw who they touched. By the time Shaw reached the forward staff section, he was carrying more than 41 files. He carried casualty notes after action reports, witness statements, a bridge completion log from the Moselle, a roster showing acting NCO duties assigned in the field, and one copied comparison sheet. That sheet was the blade. It showed promotion packets from 4 white units moving in an average of 9 days. It showed packets from Shaw's battalion stalled for an average of 168. Same forms, same command chain, same war, different skin. Patton did not read slowly when he was angry. The story was that he entered a room like artillery. That was not always true. Sometimes he became so still that everyone around him. He stood over the comparison sheet. His writing crop lay under one gloved hand. He read the dates. He read the unit names. He read Crow's coded remarks. Then he looked at Shaw. These men did the work? Yes, sir. Under fire, repeatedly. Recommended by their immediate officers. Every packet. Delayed by one major? Yes, sir. Patton looked back down. A man can lose a battle with a bad map, he said, but he can poison an army with a clean form. No one answered. Patton lifted the stack himself. Take me to the desk. The personnel office heard Patton before it saw him. Boots on wood. A door snapping open. The sudden death of office chatter. Major Crow stood so quickly his chair struck the wall. Patton walked past the clerks without greeting them. His helmet still carried dust from the road. The pearl grips on his pistols caught the flat gray window light. He put the promotion packets on Crow's desk, exactly where Crow had stamped them. Major, General, how many black soldiers' promotions are you holding? Crow swallowed. I would not describe them that way, sir. I asked for a number. 41 packets are under review. For how long? Some since October. October. Patton let the words sit in the room. How long for comparable white packets? That depends on circumstances, sir. Patton slid the comparison sheet forward. 9 days is not a circumstance. It is a confession. Crow's mouth tightened. General, my concern has been the reliability of leadership appointments during a sensitive period. Sensitive to whom? To the stability of the service. The service is crossing Germany. Yes, sir. It is not so fragile that a black corporal's stripes will knock it over. A clerk coughed once and stopped. Crow tried to recover. Sir, I believe permanent rank must reflect more than battlefield pressure. Patton leaned over the desk. Battlefield pressure is exactly where soldiers are tested. Administrative standards. Do not hide behind that word. He turned it in his hand as if examining a captured weapon. This little thing has done a great deal of damage for something made of rubber. Crow said nothing. Patton's voice stayed low. That made it worse. You used delay because delay leaves fewer fingerprints. You used review because review sounds cleaner than refusal. You counted on the war being too loud for anyone to hear what you were doing in this warm little room. Crow's jaw trembled. Sir, I acted according to my judgment. Then your judgment is unfit for command paperwork, command influence, or command anything. Patton dropped the stamp onto the desk. Those men built my roads. They opened my bridges. They kept my armor moving. When a man leads under fire, you do not ask whether his courage is socially convenient. You recognize it, or you admit you are stealing from him. Crow looked toward the clerks as if someone might save him. No one moved. Patton continued. Rank is not a decoration. It is pay. It is authority. It is the army telling every soldier in sight who has earned trust. You have been taking trust from men who earned it and handing silence back in its place. He pointed to the stack. You will process every one of these today, General. The review ended when I walked in, sir. There are channels. I am the channel. The room seemed to shrink. Patton stepped closer. And hear this clearly. You will sign them in your own hand. You will post the orders before nightfall. You will calculate retroactive pay from the original approval dates. And if one name disappears, if one packet develops another mysterious illness, I will remove you from this desk and put you somewhere paperwork cannot harm fighting men. Crow's lips parted, but no argument came out. Patton turned to the senior clerk. Bring ink. The clerk moved at once. Patton looked at Crow again. Beggin'. For the next hour, nobody in that office pretended the system was neutral. Crow signed the first packet, then the second, then the third. The stamp did not say hold anymore. It said approved. Every thud landed differently now, not like delay, like a door being kicked open. Shaw stood near the wall and watched without expression. He had learned long ago not to celebrate too early. The army could give with one hand and take with 3 forms on the next morning. But this time, Patton stayed. That mattered. He did not deliver the order and vanish into myth. He stood in the office while Crow signed page after page, while clerks amended routing logs, while the comparison sheet was copied and attached to the corrective order. By sunset, 41 promotions had been posted. 9 corporals became sergeants. 4 sergeants became staff sergeants. 1 acting platoon guide finally received the rank he had already been carrying in every way that mattered. The pay would come later. The respect came first. That night the list reached Shaw's battalion in a wet envelope. A lantern was set on an ammunition crate. The men gathered around it in the dark, boots sunk in thawing mud. Helmets tilted back, faces tired from another day of road repair. Shaw did not make a speech. He read the names: Ellis Ward, Henry Tolliver, Lewis Freeman. One by one, men who had learned not to expect much from paper heard paper finally tell the truth. Some grinned, some looked down. One man took off his glove and touched the new stripe before it had even been sewn on, as if he needed to make sure it would not vanish. The next morning something changed in the work detail. Not the danger, not the mud, not the Army's larger injustice. Segregation did not end because one general got angry in one office. But inside that battalion, the lie had lost its cleanest hiding place. The men no longer had to pretend that acting rank and real rank were the same thing. They no longer had to carry authority without recognition, and the younger soldiers finally saw the Army admit, in writing what they already knew in the dark: the men leading them had earned the right to lead. Major Crow was relieved from personnel authority before the week ended. The red hold stamp was removed from the desk and placed into an evidence envelope by an inspector who said almost nothing while he worked. A new directive went up on the wall. Promotion packets would be logged by receipt date. Delays required written cause. Comparison sheets would be reviewed weekly. No unofficial category could be created by a single officer. It was not justice big enough for history books. It was not equality. It was a bolt tightened in a leaking machine. But sometimes a machine fails one bolt at a time. And sometimes a man who hides behind procedure learns that procedure can turn around and trap him. Crow was transferred to a rear records section, handling damaged equipment inventories. It was work with numbers, crates, and no authority over soldiers' futures. Men who had once feared his initials now passed the office without lowering their voices. That may have been the cruelest punishment for him. He had wanted to decide who counted. Instead, he became a man others stopped counting. Patton never turned the incident into a speech for reporters. He was not suddenly remade into a saint by one correct act, and the army he served still carried injustices far larger than a single desk. But on that day in Trier, his anger found the right target. Not the enemy across the river, not the weather, not the shortage of fuel. A quiet enemy inside the machinery. A man using official language to make prejudice look like patience. That is why the story lasted among the soldiers who were there. Not because a general shouted, not because a villain, but because 41 men learned that the paper trail used to bury them could be dragged back into daylight. A stamp had frozen their names for 172 days. By nightfall, the same desk that denied them had to record the truth. The stripes were never a gift. They were a debt, and for once the army had to pay it.